Mohammed, you quoted the Quran a lot tonight. Let me ask you, why is the Quran a more credible final revelation of God, having been dictated to the prophet by the angel Gabriel, than the Book of Mormon as the final revelation of God, having been dictated in the 19th century in upstate New York by the angel Moroni to the prophet Joseph Smith?
The reason why is because the Quran has certain parameters and certain challenges that the Book of Mormon doesn't have. For example, it has the inimitability challenge, it has the preservation challenge. The Quran is the only preserved book.
The Whitmer family was a tremendous support to Joseph Smith, and I think their story is important in the manuscript of the Book of Mormon, particularly the printer's manuscript. Following the publication of the second edition in 1837, Oliver Cowdery retained possession of the printer's manuscript. Before dying, he presented this manuscript to David Whitmer. When scribes copied the printer's manuscript, they created bundles of paper. And so that these would not get lost, they sewed the pages together. Throughout his life, David Whitmer preserved the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon. He showed it to individuals, but he refused to donate it or sell it to anyone, and he did have offers. It's largely due to the Whitmer family that we have the manuscript today.
As predictions that predict the future that couldn't have been known at the time, on probability, we find it very difficult.
This is a revelation and prophecy on war given through Joseph Smith, December 25th, 1832. Verily, thus saith the Lord concerning the wars that will shortly come to pass, beginning at the rebellion of South Carolina, which will eventually terminate in the death and misery of many souls. And the time will come that war will be poured out upon all nations, beginning at this place. For behold, the southern state shall be divided against the northern states, and the southern states will call on other nations, even the nation of Great Britain, as it is called. And they shall also call upon other nations in order to defend themselves against other nations, and then war will be poured out upon all nations. And it shall come to pass that after many days slaves shall rise up against their masters, who shall be marshaled and disciplined for war. All right, did that happen? Absolutely. That's the Civil War, 1861 to 1865.
The Quran has a language that completely descoped the Arabic language of the people of the time. And
at least 50 types of poetic, grammatical, or literary Hebraisms have been identified in the Book of Mormon. Many of them show up in the dozens, and some of them, like chiasmus, show up in the hundreds. This brief sampling can hardly convey the full depth and breadth of the Book of Mormon's impressive complexity, but it's enough to demonstrate that the book is anything but ridiculous.
It was recognized by those linguists as something which was extraordinary.
Joseph's famous biographer Fawn Brodie saw him as a myth-maker of prodigious talent, and Harold Bloom, a Yale-trained literary scholar, considered Joseph Smith to be a religious genius.
The Quran has a structural feature that even Orientalist scholars like Raymond Farron have looked at and said that this is something which cannot be possible considering the circumstantial revelation of the Quran.
Similarly, you do find something called ring composition or concentric patterns in classical Arabic poetry. You find these similar patterns in stories, in poem literature, and it's definitely, you find them in Arabic literature. What differentiates the Quran is the amazing interconnection, the way it's so much more densely interconnected. This is a simple example of the same pattern, ring composition or concentrism in a pre-Islamic poem. That you have these same literary or symmetrical patterns occurring in the Quran, I believe, but of course in much more complicated or dense or interconnected ways. But I think in general the basic patterns, you can find similar patterns in pre-Islamic poetry and then in later poetry as well, but not to the same complexity.
And I think the main point is the Quran gives us a falsification challenge.
In November 1831, Joseph Smith gathered the elders of the Mormon Church to discuss pressing matters. He came forth with a revelation that had a challenge of its own. The revelation stated And now I, the Lord, give unto you a testimony of the truth of these commandments which are lying before you. Your eyes have been upon my servant Joseph Smith, Jr., and his language you have known, and his imperfections you have known, and you have sought in your heart's knowledge that you might express beyond his language. This you also know. Now seek ye out of the book of commandments even the least that is among them, and appoint him that is the most wise among you, or if there be any among you, that shall make one like unto it. Then ye are justified in saying that ye do not bear that they are true. But if ye cannot make one like unto it, ye are under condemnation if ye do not bear record that they are true. It should be noted that the challenge brought forth by Joseph Smith is fundamentally the same as the Quran's challenge.
I just want to say something. You're not special. We encounter polytheists, we encounter Christian Trinitarians, we encounter Zoroastrians throughout our history, and from our perspective, you're all arguing exactly the same thing.
So you just don't jump to the conclusion, look, it only could have been God which could have been the author of that.